Okay, so today we're going to be looking at translating the sine function. So today I'll be able to identify the amplitude, the period, and midline and graph the sine function. So go ahead and pause the video and type in the FLT. So this right here is the general equation. F of x equals a sine b of x plus c. A, b, and c are just variables. So they'll just be numbers or coefficients. The amplitude is the A value. And remember, the amplitude is also the height of the graph. So this right here is your amplitude. This down here is your amplitude. It's the height, and then this height right here too. Now, the period, we actually use the letter T to find the period. And to find the period, it is a formula. You're gonna take 2 pi and divide it by that letter B. If you remember what a period is the length of one cycle. So if you remember, the sine graphs always starts in the middle at 0, 0, goes up, down, back up. This right here is considered one cycle. So for example, this right here is another cycle. So I have 2 full cycles, and then it starts another cycle and the end of another cycle is there. But this right here is one cycle, this is another cycle. The last thing we're going to talk about is the midline. The midline is the middle of the line, just exactly what it means, and it is the middle. And to find the midline, you are just going to take the C value. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and type in all the steps. So step number 1 is draw the midline. Step number 2 is the amplitude sandwich, which is what I will discuss. Step 3 is to find the period, remember, which is 2 pi over b. This is a super important formula. And then you'll sketch the sine curve. So let's take a look at our very first example. We have f of x equals 3 sine of 2 of x. Right above it, I'm going to write the general equation of a sine, which is a sine bx plus c. The first thing we're going to do is find the a, b, and the c values. If you look here, the a value is 3. The b value is that number in front of that x, which is 2. And then that c value, notice here there's nothing there. So that is just 0. Remember, to find the period, it's 2 pi over b, which is 2 pi, our b value is 2. These guys right here cancel out. So our period is pi. So that means it's going to take pi to complete one full cycle. So let's go ahead and graph this. The very first step is to draw the midline. Our midline is 0. 0 is just the x-axis. That is the midline. Then it's the amplitude sandwich. Remember, to find the amplitude, that's our A value. So I'm going to go up 3. This is the top of our sandwich, the top red. We're going to call this the maximum. And then we're going to go from the midline and we're going to go down 3. So we're at -3. This is the bottom part of my sandwich. And we're going to label this the minimum. The third step is to graph the period, which is pi. So normally, if you look at our original sine curve, this is one full cycle. The original sine curve takes 2 pi. This is the original parent function, or the parent sine. It's always 2 pi. But notice here, you know, we have some numbers in here, so it's not the original sine. So that means instead of taking 2 pi to complete one full cycle, it only takes pi. Here's 2 pi. This right here is pi, right in the middle of it, right? 1 pi, 2 pi, this is 3 pi, and so forth. It's gonna take, starting at 0, 0, it's gonna end at pi. Remember, between here and here, it has to go up, back down, and back up. So if you look here, it gets squished. It's gonna go up, back here, then up. So from 0 to 2 pi, actually this graph has 2 cycles between 0 and 2 pi. If you wanted to, you can actually continue drawing multiple cycles, and notice that you can even go to the left and so forth. You're actually going to go ahead and type this function into Desmos and then screenshot it and then put it into your notes. Our next example here is example number 2. Right above it, I'm going to go ahead and write down the general equation. So a sine bx plus c. First step is to figure out your a, b, and c values. Your a value is 2. Your b value is 1/4. And then again, your c value is just 0. Remember, period is 2 pi over b. 2 pi divided by 1/4. And 2 pi divided by 1/4 is 8 pi. Because 2 pi divided by 1/4. Remember, when you divide fractions, you flip that second fraction and then change it into a multiplication sign. And then when you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. 2 pi times 4 is 8 pi. This is technically over 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 8 pi divided by 1 is 8 pi. So let's go ahead and graph this. Our C is our midline. C is at 0. We're going to go ahead and graph the amplitude. We're going to go up to. This is going to be our maximum. And then down here, we're going to be at -2. This is going to be our minimum. Now, normally, our regular sine starts at 0, 0, goes up, goes back down, and it ends at 2 pi, right? But remember, our period is actually 8 pi. I should have scaled the graph better. But that means that the graph is going to take 8 pi to complete, from here to here, and then halfway between there and there is 8 pi, and that is 1 full cycle. Again, you're going to graph that onto Desmos, print screen, and then paste that into your Google Doc. The last example I want to go over with you today is example number 3, which is f of x equals 2 sine of x minus 1. Right above it, I'm going to write down the general sine function and then figure out my variables. My a value is 2. Notice here, the b value, it's the number that's in front of x. There is no number in front of the x, so there's an imaginary 1. It's not 0. And then this guy right here, that is going to be your c value. Don't forget that's -1, so c value is -1. We're gonna go ahead and find the period. The period is 2 pi over b. And we said that our b value is 1. 2 pi divided by 1 is just 2 pi. We're gonna go ahead and start with our midline. Remember, our midline is our c value. So this time, our midline is at -1. So you're gonna look on your graph, you're gonna look for a -1 on the y-axis, which is right here. You're gonna go ahead and draw a horizontal line at -1. We're then gonna go ahead and use our amplitude to figure out the top half of our sandwich. So I'm gonna, from the midline, you're gonna go up to 1, 2. So that means you're at y equals 1, and you're gonna draw a horizontal line there. We'll call this the maximum. And then from the midline, we're gonna go ahead and go down to 1, 2. We're gonna go and draw another horizontal line. That is gonna be the bottom half of the sandwich. So our graph is going to be between these two lines. We're gonna go ahead and look at our period. Our period is 2 pi. That means the graph is going to take 2 pi to complete one cycle. Now, you always start on your midline. So instead of starting at 0, 0, this time you're now starting at 0, -1. And then remember we said our period is 2 pi. So between here and here, you're going to go up, down, and then back up. That's one full cycle. You can always draw more cycles because it does oscillate back and forth. You're gonna go ahead and graph this guy onto Desmos and then print screen and then paste that into your notes.